It was just past 6 when I stepped onto the porch, the kind of morning that held its breath, quiet, still. The dew clung to the banister like it wasn't ready to let go of the night. A few birds chirped half-heartedly from the neighbor's tree, like even they weren't quite awake yet. Inside, the house was still. Not cold, not warm, just neutral. It used to feel like home. These days, it felt more like a waiting room. I boiled the water like I always did. 2 cups, no sugar. My mother liked her tea plain. I'd been making it for them every morning since Dad's knees gave out, and Mom stopped coming downstairs before 8. Some things became muscle memory. I reached for the white porcelain cup, hers. No design. Just white. Simple. It always sat on the same corner of the table. It hadn't moved in weeks. I poured the tea, set the cup down, and waited. After a few minutes of silence, I walked up the stairs and tapped on their bedroom door. Nothing. I tried again. Still nothing. They must have slept in. That was rare, but not unheard of. I went back downstairs, figuring I'd let the tea cool just enough so it wouldn't burn their tongues. That's when my phone rang. Betrayal. He was prepping for a flight, hadn't even reached cruising altitude and already calling. He always found time to check in. That man could be in the cockpit over the Rockies and still ask if I remembered to eat breakfast. Hey, I answered, trying to sound awake. He chuckled. You still at home? Of course. Where else would I be? There was a pause. You sitting down? I frowned. Should I be? Babe, he said, voice dropping. I just saw your parents. They boarded my flight. I blinked. What? First class. Your mom was holding her big red purse. Your dad had the neck pillow with the faded Cowboys logo. I didn't speak. They showed me their passports, he continued. They're going to France. I laughed. Short? Hollow? No, they're not. They're upstairs. Sleeping. Laziel, they're on my flight. I'm looking at them. I glanced at the tea, still full, steam curling upward, not even halfway gone. My hand tightened around the phone. You're sure? I waved. Your mom smiled. Your dad gave me the thumbs up. He wasn't joking. I walked to the hallway. The closet door stood open, shoes lined neatly along the bottom. My dad's work boots still dusty. Mom's floral sandals where they always were. None missing. I walked into the guest room, untouched. I opened the fridge. Her lunchbox was still in there. She'd packed it last night. I'd watched her do it. I called her cell. Straight to voicemail. Then Dad's. Same thing. I stood there, one hand on the fridge door, the other still gripping my phone, heart knocking loud enough to echo through my ribs. This couldn't be right. I called Thane. My brother never answered on the first ring. Today, he picked up immediately. Hey, sis. Thane. Did you know Mom and Dad left for France? A beat. He sighed. You're probably just stressed, sis. Maybe you dreamed they were home? I made tea for them this morning. Dreams feel real sometimes, he said gently. Try to get some rest. I hung up. Then tried Zarina. She didn't even say hello. They've been planning this trip for weeks. You must have missed the memo. That was it. No apology. No soft landing. Not anger yet. Just that quiet sting, like being the last to know your own name changed. I opened my inbox. Nothing. No texts. No call history. No group message saying goodbye. Nothing. I walked back into the kitchen. The tea had gone cold. I picked up the white cup, still full. My fingers trembled as I set it in the sink. I couldn't bring myself to pour it out. Somehow, that felt final. So I just placed it down, gentle, like it might break under any more truth. I stepped outside and sat in my father's old rocking chair. It groaned under me, same way it always had. The sky hadn't changed, neither had the grass. The street was still quiet, but something in me had cracked, and I didn't know what would come through. I sat on the porch for what felt like hours, but it couldn't have been more than 15 minutes. The tea was still cold when I walked back into the house. The silence had changed by then. It no longer felt like rest. It felt like avoidance, like something was intentionally being kept from me. I made my way down the hallway and noticed a drawer slightly ajar on the side table. That drawer hadn't been opened in years, not since Dad used to keep his old business receipts there. A corner of paper stuck out, yellowed just enough to catch my eye. I pulled it out. It wasn't some forgotten invoice. It was a printed travel receipt. 2 first-class tickets to Paris. Departure, this morning. Booked by Wexler Lyon Legal Travel Division. Zarina's firm. There it was. Black ink. Clear date. The tickets were purchased nearly a month ago. A month. I stood in the hallway, blinking at the paper like it might morph into something else. My brain rushed through possibilities. Maybe it was a gift for someone else. Maybe she'd planned it for clients. But then I saw the passenger names. My parents. I remembered helping Mom sort laundry last week. She had asked me to help fold a load of towels. She smiled when she saw how I still folded them in thirds like she taught me. Nothing about her felt like a woman hiding an international vacation. There was no tension, no excitement, no accidental slips. She even asked if I wanted to make chili on Saturday. Why would you plan to leave the country and still ask about chili? My hands felt colder than the cup had been. I walked toward the kitchen to call her again, but this time I reached for the landline. 2 rings. Then her voice. Laziel, I can't talk now. Click. Nothing. No dial tone. No static. No background noise. Just gone. I stood holding the phone. I didn't move for a while. The silence that followed was louder than the words she said. Or maybe the way she said my name. Rushed. She hushed, like she didn't want someone to hear her. I tried again, straight to voicemail, and again, disconnected. It wasn't a dropped call. It was a choice. I placed the phone down, slower than necessary, and sat at the kitchen table. The air felt heavy, like someone else was watching me and holding their breath. I needed answers. Not comfort, not apologies, just clarity. I opened my email. Nothing new. I scrolled back through the family thread. No travel talk, no trip updates, nothing. Then I remembered the family had created a new group chat months ago. They claimed it was for faster planning, since the old thread had too many names. I hadn't thought much of it. A cousin had once joked, "You're too offline for these chats." At the time, I laughed. But now it felt like the first brick pulled from under me. I logged into the old shared family Gmail we used for coordinating holiday events. The inbox had been mostly quiet. But hidden under the social tab was a series of RSVPs, dinner confirmations, flight reminders, photo drop links from the airport, all shared among them, excluding me. The trip had been in motion for weeks. And I wasn't even an afterthought. I opened my laptop browser and searched the travel agency listed on the receipt. Sure enough, it pulled up a slick corporate site. Wexler Lyon, Legal Travel Division. Zarina's signature branding, clean, sharp, efficient, just like her. I typed in the invoice number from the receipt and pulled up the digital itinerary. Every detail matched, down to the seat numbers. Zarina had booked it. Her email was listed as the point of contact. No one else, no mention of a gift, no shared responsibility. This wasn't forgetfulness, it was coordination. I sat back in the chair. My stomach turned, not out of anger, but recognition. They'd moved on without me, not in a dramatic way. No slammed doors, no harsh goodbyes. Just a quiet omission. I picked up the receipt again, feeling its edges dig slightly into my palm. It wasn't sharp, but it still hurt. How many other trips had I missed? How many photos had I been cropped out of before the shutter even clicked? It wasn't that I hadn't been invited, it was that I wasn't considered. I folded the receipt carefully. Too carefully. Like it was something sacred, when really, it was just the evidence of something everyone else already knew. I whispered, "So I'm not even the default anymore." That's when it hit me. This wasn't absence. This was intentional distance. By late afternoon, the light coming through the living room windows had thinned. It wasn't sunset yet, but it had that flat, tired color that made everything in the house look older than it was. I didn't want to sit down. I didn't want to think. So I did what I always did when I needed to feel like I had a purpose. Find something to clean, sort, fix. I went into Dad's study, looking for a box of old tax records. I figured if I could at least match some dates, maybe I could explain the receipt. Maybe there was a chance this whole thing was a misunderstanding, blown out of proportion by a rattled mind. The bookshelf had barely changed. Still smelled like cedar and newspaper. I pulled out the box marked Receipts, 2000 to 2015. Nothing inside was newer than my last heartbreak. Then, tucked between two thick binders, I found it. A bright blue folder labeled Estate Planning. That alone stopped me. Dad didn't use new folders. He reused old manila ones. Always had. This one was pristine. Too clean. Like it hadn't been touched until recently. I opened it. Right on top was a notarized deed. The house had been transferred, legally, cleanly, to my brother Thane. No warning, no conversation, no co-signature, just a signature from my father and a stamp from the state. My name wasn't there. Not even a mention. 12 years. That's how long I'd taken care of this place. Repainted the gutters, resealed the windows, paid the property tax out of my own pocket when they were behind. There was a post-it stuck inside the folder. Handled via ZW. Private route. Zarina. Of course. I backed up a step, holding the folder against my chest. It didn't feel like betrayal. It felt like paperwork. And somehow, that made it worse. I sat down in the hallway, the folder on my lap. Last spring, I spent 3 days repainting the porch railings. I remember Zarina walking up the steps and laughing. "You're always fussing over this house like it's yours." I laughed with her that day. But now I see it wasn't a joke. It was a warning. I pulled out my phone, opened my budgeting app, searched property tax, 8 years worth of payments. Some years I split it with Thane, but the last 3, all mine. Every number, every payment, all pointed to one thing. I'd been maintaining a house that I never legally owned. Never would. My mouth went dry. Not because I was shocked, because I wasn't. I sat there for a long time, then stood and went back to my room. I reached for my journal. It was gone. That journal had every odd moment in it, things that hadn't made sense back then. Zarina's legal maneuvering, Thane's habit of missing emails, Kalis's backhanded compliments. I'd written it all down, dates, times, feelings, and now it was missing. I searched the nightstand, the dresser, my closet, the kitchen, and then I stopped. There was one room I hadn't checked, Kalis and Thane's guest room. I hesitated, then I walked down the hallway, slow but steady, and opened their door. Inside, everything was clean, ordered, deceptively untouched. I opened the closet, nothing. Checked under the bed, then the bookshelf, a stack of magazines, nothing out of place, until I lifted them. There it was, my journal, open to a page about Zarina and her tendency to weaponize fine print. My stomach turned. I didn't know what scared me more, that Kalis had found it or that she hid it. Behind me, the door creaked open. "Looking for something?" Kalis asked, like we were discussing a missing coffee mug. I turned around. She smiled. I held up the journal. She didn't flinch. "Oh, it must have gotten mixed up when I borrowed a book. I meant to return it." I didn't speak. I just nodded. She walked past me slowly, like she was the one giving me space. Like she was still ahead in a game I hadn't even agreed to play. I carried the journal back to my room, sat on the edge of the bed, wrote a new page. This house may not be mine on paper, but every memory here has my fingerprints. I tore it from the binding, folded it twice, slid it inside the tea canister on my shelf, right beneath the lid. That canister used to hold loose leaves. Now it held loose truths. I wasn't angry. Not anymore. I was awake. Not everyone who smiles at you means well, and not every betrayal screams. Some whisper, through notarized deeds and borrowed books. I didn't sleep much that night, not because of the noise. The house was dead quiet, too quiet for comfort. I stayed up listening to it not make a sound. By morning, the ache in my chest had settled into something heavier. Not pain, something like cement. I made a pot of coffee I didn't want, then sat down at the old family desktop in the study. My intention was simple: pull up a few old tax documents to track exactly when the house changed hands. I needed dates, something solid. Instead, I found something else. A folder on the desktop, labeled Z Travel, Conferge. In that clipped, aggressive way, Zarina named everything she thought was above scrutiny. My fingers hesitated over the mouse. Then I double-clicked. Inside was an email thread between her and Thane. No greeting, no signature, just subject lines and direct, surgical words. Let's finalize Paris. Don't loop in Laziel. It'll complicate things. I leaned back. The timestamp said 4 weeks ago. Before the tea. Before the silence. Before I started imagining I'd gone crazy. I read further. If she finds out, she'll spiral. And frankly, we've coddled that for long enough. Coddled? That word sat in my mouth like metal. She made it sound like I was a tantrum they'd been tolerating. Not a daughter, not a sister, just a variable. Thane's only reply in the thread was a thumbs up. No questions, no hesitation, just agreement. I read it again, and again, then out loud. Not to punish myself, but because I needed to hear it spoken. I needed to strip away any illusion that maybe, just maybe, it was all a mistake. It wasn't cruel, it was calculated. They hadn't left me out because they forgot. They'd planned to. I sat there for a while. Then I whispered something I hadn't allowed myself to consider before. I don't think they love me. I think they just put up with me. It didn't come with tears. Just a numb quiet that stayed in my shoulders, in my hands, in the breath I held a second too long before letting go. I needed air, so I went up to the attic. There's a box of scrapbooks up there, one from every decade of our lives. I hadn't opened them in years. I pulled out the one labeled 2000 to 2010. Toward the back, tucked next to a 4th of July photo and an old playbill, I found a folded newspaper article. Zarina, the Foundation of Us. It was a piece she wrote for a community newsletter. I unfolded it. In the article, she thanked the family for their support in her career, credited herself for organizing our parents' 35th anniversary celebration, called it her first experience in logistical leadership. I sat back and laughed, but not the funny kind. That was me. I called the caterer. I drove to pick up the sheet cake. I put the plastic tablecloths in the car. Zarina had shown up late. Didn't even stay to clean. Further down, she recalled the lemonade stand we had as kids. She said it was her idea, her first business model, her words, not mine. But that wasn't how it went. I was the one who mixed the powder. I convinced her to sell it instead of pouring it down the drain. And now it belonged to her. Publicly, proudly. I didn't just lose my place, I muttered. I got ghost-written out of my own life. I put the scrapbook back in the box and shut the lid. Not out of anger, out of finality. Back in my room, I stared at my phone. Still no messages, no missed calls, no surprise apologies. I opened a draft message and typed, "Why didn't you include me?" Then stared at it for a while. Deleted it. What was the point? If they didn't hear me when I was in the room, they wouldn't hear me through a screen. So I reached for my journal, opened a new page, wrote a title across the top, "The Time They Edited Me Out." Then I just sat with it. I thought about how many stories in our family had probably been told without me, shaped without me, sold without me in the frame. I closed the journal, didn't slam it, just closed it. Then I closed the laptop. Not out of defeat, out of decision. I walked to the porch and brewed myself a cup of tea. Not because I needed warmth, but because I needed the silence of doing something familiar for myself. I sat in my father's old rocking chair, held the tea without sipping. My heart whispered, ask them why. But my pride answered louder, let them answer to themselves. The screen inside dimmed, and so did that old version of me, the one who still hoped. I needed air, real air, not the kind that comes through ceiling vents, the kind that still smells like grass clippings and gasoline from the neighbor's mower. I left the house without grabbing a jacket. The air had a bite to it, but I didn't care. The park wasn't crowded. A few kids with scooters zipped past me. Some older men gathered by the chess tables, arguing more than playing. I didn't plan to stop. But the bench by the duck pond was empty. So I sat. An older man joined me a few minutes later, wore a baseball cap with a high school logo I didn't recognize. We nodded politely. He looked out over the water and said, "Beautiful day for it." I nodded back. "It is." After a pause, he said, "You local?" "Born and raised." He smiled. "You look familiar. You part of the Blythe family?" I hesitated. "Yes." He grinned. "Of course. Your parents are something else. Always going on trips, helping the church, proud of their 2 boys." I turned toward him slowly. "I'm their daughter." He blinked, confused. Not embarrassed, just unaware. "Oh," he said. "I didn't know they had a daughter." I nodded once. "Apparently, a lot of people don't." We sat there in silence for a few beats. He wasn't trying to hurt me. That's what stung the most. He wasn't mean. He just believed what he was told. I thanked him, stood up, and walked away. My legs felt heavier than before. My shoes made a sound with every step, but it was like I couldn't hear it anymore. 2 boys. 2. I didn't even make the list. I walked until I reached the cafe near the corner, ordered a tea, took the seat by the window. I pulled out my phone and typed in my father's name, plus a few keywords. Awards, community service, retirement article. It didn't take long. A local news article came up from 2 years ago. Featured photo, headline, full paragraph about his contributions. And the line, "He is the proud father of 2 sons." There it was again, in print. For the public, confirmed by someone, approved by someone, probably written by Zarina herself. I stared at that sentence until the screen blurred. Then I closed the tab. Back home, the house felt more museum than memory. I went into the kitchen, drawn by a thread I couldn't name. The calendar was still hanging on the side of the fridge. I flipped it back to March, my birthday. There was a photo pinned to that square. The cake read, "Happy March babies." No names, no candles, just generic frosting and shared space. I remembered that party. I'd asked about the missing names. Zarina said, "It's easier this way." Thane and Kalis's daughter was born in March too. They wanted to combine the celebrations, save money, save effort. When I asked if I could bring my own cake, Kalis said, "Just take a slice, don't make it about yourself." And I did. I remembered cleaning up alone after that party. The others had migrated to the living room, half drunk and half laughing. I stayed in the kitchen, holding paper plates stacked with frosting and soda cups still half full. Not one person had thanked me, not even a nod. I opened the drawer in my room where I kept birthday cards. There was one from that year, folded shut, no envelope. I opened it, blank inside. No signature, no handwriting, not even a love, Mom. I stared at it like it might change. I had kept it. Why? Habit? Hope? To prove something. It didn't matter. That night, I sat on the floor with my journal, the deed folder, the printed emails, and that birthday card. I placed them all in a box, wrote on the lid with a black Sharpie, "If I forget who I am." I tucked the box under my bed, then opened my journal to a fresh page, and wrote, "They are not wrong because they forgot me. They are wrong because they chose to." Sunday morning hit different when you already knew what the sermon couldn't fix. I went to church anyway. Not for comfort, habit mostly. I sat near the back, by the wall with the community photo exhibit. I'd walked by those framed snapshots 100 times without really looking. But this time, I did, and there it was. A large family portrait under bright glass, Mom and Dad at the center, Zarina standing tall in a cobalt blazer, Thane next to her with Kalis and their daughter flanking him. Even Varel was in the frame. I wasn't. I stepped closer, as if my eyes had missed something obvious. But no, I wasn't cropped out, I was never in. Underneath the photo, a brass plaque read, "The Legacy of the Blythe Siblings, Zarina Thane." That word again, legacy. I checked the date on the corner of the photo frame. 3 months ago, the same weekend they told me they were laying low. I had stayed home to prepare a pot roast. They'd gone to a photo shoot. After service, the family suggested brunch. I wasn't included in the text thread, but Kaylis made sure to mention it in the parking lot, like she was tossing me a leftover. We arrived at the restaurant, and when I walked in, the hostess glanced at the reservation list. "Are you Kaylis?" I shook my head. "No." She squinted. "The reservation's under Kaylis Rourke. Table for 7. She led me to the table. Everyone else was already seated. A line of small name cards curved around the cloth napkins, one at each plate, except mine. I stood there for a moment, scanning for any sign of my name. Zarina caught my eye and let out a short laugh. "Oops! Must have slipped their mind again." The others chuckled. Thane lifted his mimosa. I sat down and didn't say a word. As they clinked glasses, I kept my hands in my lap. I stared at the empty plate in front of me while the conversation ricocheted around the table like I wasn't there. No one asked how my week had been. No one looked my way. Zarina started telling a story about a trip to the lake house when we were kids. "I got so sick," she said, smiling. "Had to be carried out by Dad himself." I frowned. That had been me. I spoke up gently. "Actually, that was my flu. You stayed in the cabin." Zarina tilted her head. "Are you sure you were even there?" Laughter. Just enough to make me feel it. Kaylis reached under the table and squeezed Zarina's hand like she'd scored a point. I didn't argue. I picked up my napkin and began folding. It was a cloth one, starched. It reminded me of the way my dad used to teach me to make paper cranes when I was little. He said, folding something with precision calmed your hands when your heart couldn't calm itself. So I folded. Quietly, one crease at a time. Thane leaned over. "She's making animals again. How quaint." No one stopped him. I placed the folded bird on my plate and looked at it for a moment. Then I said, not loud, but clearly, "It's not for you." And I stood. I didn't slam my chair back. I didn't curse or cry. I just left. Outside, the sun had broken through the clouds, but it felt colder than it had all morning. I walked to my car and sat behind the wheel for a minute before starting it. I wasn't invisible. They just didn't want to see me. That portrait in the church? That wasn't an accident. That was design. I unlocked my phone and opened the Notes app. Typed 3 words. Start the file. It was time to build a record. Not a plea. Not a cry for help. A file. The house was quiet when I got home. No footsteps. No voices behind closed doors. I liked it that way. Silence doesn't demand answers. I set my keys down and opened the tablet to check my notes, trying to keep my mind focused. That's when the screen blinked with a notification, calendar sync from a group thread I hadn't seen in a while. Mom-Dad's welcome home brunch planning, Sunday, 11 a.m. My breath stuck in my chest. I tapped it. Access denied. Group archived. I sat down, opened the old shared Gmail we used for family event RSVPs years ago. Maybe something slipped through. I found the thread within minutes. A cascade of messages, threads I hadn't seen, confirmations, jokes, photos from the airport, messages from Zarina, Thane, Kaylis, even Varel. Everyone but me. And then, there it was. Kaylis had written, "Let's keep it clean. No art debate from Laziel this time." The kind of sentence meant to sound funny, but it wasn't. It was coded dismissal. Dismissal from something I once thought I belonged to. I didn't cry. Just pressed the power button and let the screen go black. That evening, after the sun dropped below the rooftops, I sat in the living room, drinking lukewarm tea when Aranis wandered in. "You know your sculpture's in the new gallery, right?" My spoon clinked against the cup. "What sculpture?" "The big one. The tree with all the broken mirrors. They said it was Kaylis's." I stood up, grabbed my coat, and drove straight to downtown Fayetteville. The gallery wasn't crowded, just a few couples strolling and commenting. I walked to the back wall, and there it was, my sculpture. The roots made of wire, the trunk layered with old receipts, the branches jutting out with fragments of words etched into glass. The placard beside it read, "Donated by Kaylis Rourke." No mention of me. A woman nearby whispered to her partner, "She always had good taste. I love what she finds." Kaylis. The woman who took my journal. who smirked through my memories. Now she was curating my identity like it was a Pinterest board. I didn't cry. I took out my phone and snapped a photo, then another, and another, close-up of the placard, of the signature she forged. Back home, I opened my laptop and clicked into a folder I created just minutes earlier. R3, record, reflect, reclaim. Inside, I dropped the gallery photos, uploaded screenshots of the chat, attached PDFs of the house deed, the email, the blank birthday card. I started a document and titled it, Proof of Pattern. Then I began to write, line by line, date by date. It wasn't just about them excluding me, it was about erasure, and I wasn't going to let it go quiet anymore. I added a quote at the top of the file. If you tell the story enough times, they forget whose it was. Then I pulled the napkin from my coat pocket, the same one I folded at brunch. It still held the crane shape, corners pressed tight. I smoothed it out on the table, flattened it with the back of my palm. I took a pen and wrote 4 names in a row. Zarina, Thane, Kalis, Varel. On the back, just one question. What does justice look like without revenge? I stared at it for a long while. I didn't have the answer. But for the first time, I was ready to ask it out loud. The next morning, I drafted a formal email to the gallery board. Subject: Artwork misattribution. Request for correction. Simple. Direct. Unemotional. I attached the photo proof, signed it with my full name, then printed 3 copies of the sculpture photo. 1 for my file, 1 to mail, and 1 I folded and tucked into the inside pocket of my purse. I walked outside, down the steps to the porch. The rocking chair sat empty. I sat in it, didn't hesitate this time. For years, I thought I had to be given a seat. Turns out, I could just take one. I didn't send an agenda. Just a message. Let's have dinner together before Mom and Dad return from their trip. No specifics, no hint of tone. Polite, casual, something they wouldn't read into. I knew if I framed it like a confrontation, half of them wouldn't show. But curiosity, that'd pull them in like moths to porch light. By 6:30, the house was full. Zarina was the first through the door. As usual, all posture and perfume. Kalis followed, carrying her dessert tray like she'd invented fruit tarts. Thane trailed behind, not really looking at anyone. Even Varel showed, late, but he brought wine like it would cover the absence of integrity. I'd set the table earlier, plates perfectly aligned, napkins folded, glasses upside down on linen mats. But one chair sat slightly apart, turned away from the table, not by mistake. I didn't take the head seat. I didn't need to. Dinner started normally enough. Too normal. Laughter that sounded like performance. Chatter that swirled around me like I wasn't there. I let them settle in, let them believe it was just another Sunday. Then I reached into my purse and placed a black envelope on the table. The room quieted. This, I said, is a transcript from Dad, 2 weeks before he left. Zarina opened her mouth. I didn't give her time. I tapped my phone screen and played the recording. His voice crackled to life. If anything happens to me, Laziel is the only one who never asked for anything but gave everything. Forks froze midair. I didn't want to sign those papers, but Zarina kept insisting. Said it would simplify things. I didn't want to argue. Thane's fork clinked against his plate. Kalis cleared her throat. I lifted my hand slightly, palm out. No words. They stopped. The silence didn't last. From the far end of the room, a voice piped up. Mrs. Calloway, the neighbor. Someone had invited her. Probably Kalis, thinking it would add warmth. Mrs. Calloway looked genuinely puzzled. Wait, so she's not the adopted one? No one laughed. Zarina's face turned the kind of red that doesn't fade fast. I just always assumed, Mrs. Calloway continued. Never saw her name at the civic events, or in the program. I blinked. Once, then said calmly, I'm not adopted, but I've certainly been orphaned in spirit. That landed harder than any accusation I could have planned. Kalis had the decency to lower her eyes. I turned toward her. You credited yourself for the sculpture. Then to Thane. You signed for the house I've maintained for over a decade. And to Zarina, you built your legacy by editing mine. No one interrupted. I faced my mother last. She hadn't said a word all evening. Her hands trembled in her lap. She looked at me like I was a stranger, and maybe I was. Finally, she spoke. I thought silence would hurt less than confrontation. She paused, swallowed. I was wrong. I nodded. Not in forgiveness. In acknowledgement. I walked to the empty chair I'd set aside earlier. There was no name on it, just space. I placed the napkin crane on the seat, same one I'd folded during brunch, then opened the folder I'd brought. This is R3, my record. If you don't want to remember the truth, I'll make sure others will. No one stopped me. No one asked questions. They just watched. And I let them. 2 weeks. That's how long it had been since that dinner table turned from ceremony to confrontation, since my father's voice, recorded, trembling, said the one thing I needed to hear, that I was seen, that I wasn't crazy, that I had given everything, and someone had finally said it out loud. The silence afterward wasn't loud. It wasn't anything. It just was. I woke up in my new place, half the size, twice the piece, the kind of apartment where nothing creaks unless I want it to, where the air doesn't carry other people's intentions, no footsteps above, no phone calls I didn't ask for, no suggestion that I was overreacting. I walked into the kitchen, still barefoot, and turned on the kettle, pulled down the white teacup, the same one I'd used the morning everything started unraveling, but now, at the bottom of that cup, etched in my own hand with permanent marker, I'm still here. And I was. I poured the water and sat by the window while it steeped, watching the street below. Nothing urgent, nothing expected of me, and no one texting to ask if I was coming to brunch. I checked my phone anyway. No messages, no missed calls. Not from Mom, not from Zarina, not from Thane, not from Kalis, and definitely not from Varel. I stopped wondering what they felt after I walked out of that dining room. Guilt, maybe? More likely discomfort. Or just irritation that I ruined their illusion. I didn't know anymore, and I wasn't chasing that answer down. I opened my laptop to a clean inbox. A couple emails from the gallery. They'd updated the plaque on my sculpture. Gave me full credit. No drama, just the right thing, finally done. One line caught my eye. We'd like to commission a new piece, something about reclaiming identity. I said it out loud, to the empty room. Yes. That afternoon, I drove to the house one last time. The street was as I left it, neat lawns, dogs barking behind fences. The mailbox still dented from when I backed into it 3 years ago. The flower beds I'd kept alive were gone, replaced with fresh mulch and ornamental stones. Cleaner, less personal. I parked across the street and walked up the steps. My key still worked, though I knew it wouldn't much longer. Inside, it smelled like furniture polish and lemon cleaner. Someone was preparing for a future without me. I walked the hallways slowly, ran my hand along the railing I once sanded down myself, glanced at the baseboard trim I'd repainted after Dad tripped on it that one winter. The memories didn't stab. They just sat there, still, like framed pictures on the walls, seen, not felt. In the guest room, on the shelf above the desk, the crane napkin I'd folded was still sitting there. No one had moved it. I picked it up gently, refolded one corner that had softened, and placed it in my purse. Downstairs, I left a letter on the kitchen table, addressed to Mom. It didn't scold, didn't accuse, it simply said, I don't hate you. I just stopped letting myself be invisible to stay loved. And at the bottom, if you ever want to meet me as a person, not as a placeholder, I'll be here. I walked to the front door, turned the lock behind me, not in anger, in closure. Then I stepped off the porch, not looking back. I didn't need a final blessing from that house. It had taken enough. Back at my apartment, I pulled out 2 chairs onto the tiny balcony. One for me, one for whoever came next. Friend, stranger, truth. I brewed another cup of tea, sat down with it, quiet, unbothered, and opened a new journal. First line, written clean. You don't have to be invited to belong. You just have to stop asking for permission.